we use rounding in order to estimate answers. Also, money is always rounded to the 100th place. So I just want to mention that because the first introduction is to identify the places to the right of the decimal, the names of them. And then we're going to start rounding to an indicated place. So understanding that money is always rounded to the 100th is going to be very important. So I'm just going to add that as a note here. Rounds. Oh, it just switched. That's really kind of cool. So money rounds to the 100th. Okay, so on that note, let's go ahead and look at the large number here. And let's label each part. And then I'm going to tell you how you name it. Okay, so the place, first number to the right, or first place to the right of the decimal is the 10th. Second place is the 100th. Third place is 1000th. Okay. Fourth place is 10,000th. Thousandth. I'm going to go ahead and clean that up because that is not legible. Let's try that again. 1000th. There we go. Much better. So here's how I remember the name of each place to the right. So 10 has 1 0. So it is one place to the right. And it's to the right of the decimal, right? So it's its relation to the decimal point. 100 is 2 places to the right. 1000 is 3 places, and so forth. Okay, so notice the number of places to the right aligns with the number of zeros that you think of for that given place name, right? 10 or 10th. Well, 10 is 1 0. 100th or 100. 100 has 2 zeros, and so forth. Also, it's important to know that TH means that you are to the right of the decimal. So TH at the end means to the right of 0. Okay, so now that we know all of that, let's look at the money, right? So it says a note about vocabulary when rounding money. So again, it always rounds to the 100th place, okay? And then for vocabulary, it says round to the nearest cent. Cent is referring to that last place in your money, right? If you were to say 52 cents, for example, that looks like that. Well, 2 places to the right is the 100th place and the last place you can have for money. So the 100th place means cent. Okay, so for the amount that we're working with here, rounding to the nearest cent, right, gives me that value. Now this was a little bit interesting because with an 8 to the right of that 9, it means the 9 goes up. Well, if the 9 goes up, that turns to a 10. So this is a unique time where the place to the left, right? So the 9 goes up because of the 8. That turns it to a 10, and so that means there's actually that 10 that is applied to the 7. Then I have a 0 left over. So anytime you end up going up from 9 and needing to go to 10, you just move that 1 place to the left, which is how I got the 8, and then to the right is a 0. So good introduction for what happens with that. All right, so the nearest dollar, well, that means, I'm going to clean this up a little bit, that we are working with that, right? If it were $5, you would just have one place to the left of the decimal. So we look to the right and we see that there is a 7 there. So that means my 5 has to go up. So rounding to the nearest dollar gives me $46. The nearest $10. So take just a second and see if you can figure out what place that might be. And then do the same thing for D. Pause the video, right? And then watch what I do. All right, so nearest $10. I'm going to erase this stuff. Well, $10 is referring to this place, right? So if I had $10, you would write that like this. And so that shows that I'm basically the second place to the left of the decimal is the $10 place in money. All right, so if that's the case, just so we don't continue having to look up and down, I'm going to rewrite that. Well, if my $10 place is this one, I look to the right, which is a 5. That means that this 4 has to go up, and it goes up to 5, so it's 50.00, and that is that dollar amount rounded to the nearest $10. All right, and then last and certainly not least, we have our, just rewriting this. Okay, now we are doing 10 cents. Well, that's that number right there. So I look at the 7, I look one more place to the right. I see that that's a 9, so it means my 7 must go up. So it becomes $45.80. All right, that is it. So let's now go down to 1. And now that we've talked about the different places in a number, and we've talked about the meaning of vocabulary when rounding to dollars, let's go ahead and do this without the video first so that you can test and see where your understanding is. You could do 1A and then check the video, go and try B, or you could try all of them or some of them, right, and then turn on the video. But either way, I'd like you to pause at this point and try at least A, if not all of them, before you turn it back on. All right, so we're being asked to round to the requested place. Before we ever get ready to round, it's good to identify the places that already exist in a number. So for 1A, we have the 10th, hundredths, thousandths. So the name of this number is 27 and, so that's your and symbol, 935 thousandths. So notice you state the number that you normally would, right? 27, and indicates a decimal. And then you state the full number as though that's all you're looking at, 935, and then figure out what place the last number is in, which in this case is the thousandth. So it's 27 and 935 thousandth. And we are rounding it to the 10th place. If you need to, go back and double check the naming convention, right, and the rounding, so that when you look at this, you can say, okay, 10th place, where is that? Well, that's the first value to the right of the decimal. If we're rounding, all we care about is the number to the right. If it's 4 or lower, the number doesn't move. If it's 5 or greater, then it does. Well, 3 is not 5 or greater, so that means that my 10th place is unchanged. So I'm going to just drop those off, and I get 27 9/10. I always talk about opportunities to check our answers once we have them. The way to check your rounding, at least whether you've done it to the right place or not, is to look at the place you're rounding to and make sure, so in this case you have 10th, so a 10th is the first place to the right of the decimal, so you should only have one thing to the right of the decimal, which is all we have, and so that is 27 9/10, and that is your final answer. So let's move to the next one. Here, we're doing the 100th place. So that means we need 2 places to the right. So our final answer can only have 2 places to the right of the decimal. We look at the number just to the right of that, and it's an 8. Well, 5 or greater makes the number being rounded go up. So I'm going to cross that off, and I get 2 and 46. So 2 and 46/100th, right? 2 places to the right. I'm going to clean that up a little bit. I call those rightos because, normally they'd be typos, but I'm writing, so there you go. All right, and so that is your final answer. All right, this next one, we're dealing in, it's out of alphabet. Oh, I see what it's doing. That's okay. So actually, let's go to C. So we're following alphabetical order. All right. So here we are rounding to the ones place. Well, the ones place is the first place to the right of the decimal. Notice there's no TH, so that means that it's to the left and not to the right. Plus there's no 1th place, right? There's only a ones when you're dealing with the left side of the decimal. So I've identified the place that we're rounding. I go 1 place to the right and I see there's an 8. So I know that 9 has to go up. So this is similar to the one that we talked about earlier, where because it's a 9, when that 9 goes up, I'm going to just write that part because that's what we care about, right? We don't need to pay attention to those guys. Well, if 9 goes up, that becomes 10. So that means that I have 1. Well, if 1 moves from here over to that, the 3 goes up to 4, and then I have a 0. Since I'm rounding to the ones place, my number needs to end at the ones place. So again, there's that check, right? So if I had done a decimal with another point, for example, that would have been rounded to the 10th place. Ones place, there should be nothing to the right of the decimal. So your final answer is 140. So D, we have to the 1000th place. So step 1, identify where the 1000th place is. It's to the right of the decimal. It is 3 places to the right of the decimal because remember, 1,000 has 3 zeros. So it's 3 places to the right. Look to the number to the right. Is it 5 or greater? Yeah. So that means this goes away and the remaining place goes up. So I get 89,374,000. That's it. Okay, next one. We're dealing in money. So the nearest dollar. Well, that's the first value to the left of the decimal, right? So if it were $9, it would be 9.00. If it were $10, then there are 2 numbers to the left, and so you would be rounding to the 10th dollar. Okay, but again, because it's nearest dollar, it's that first place to the left of the decimal. So I've marked it. Now I look to the right. 1, well, 9 is 5 or greater. So I know that this number, the 5, has to go up. So I get $16. Notice when I state it, it's $16, right? Singular dollar. So that's another way you can that one doesn't work quite as well as looking and making sure that you don't have any places, okay, beyond what you're looking for. Now, $16 is what you would normally see, but because I want you to remember, for now at least, that whatever place you're rounding to should be the last place with something in it, we'll just go ahead and leave this at 16 for now. I would accept that. In the future, you'll want to remember that for money, you want to do that 0.00 in most cases. All right, and then the last one, so the nearest cent. We have to remember what place cent refers to. That is the second place to the right of the decimal. I look to the right, it's a 7, so that's going to go away, and I know that the place I'm rounding to is going to go up to a 3. So I end up with 164 and 93 cents. And that is your final answer. At this point, go ahead and pull out a calculator. You don't want to be using a phone calculator because you can't use those on tests. So it's better to be using the equipment while you're practicing that you would use on your test. I have students frequently come up to me either at the beginning of an exam or in the middle of an exam, and there's some setting on their calculator that isn't giving them what they need. You don't want to discover those things on exams because you're really limited in terms of time and also the way to figure out the answer to it. So make sure that whatever you're going to use on your test, you use while you're practicing. All right, so notice here, generally it says round answers to the nearest cent. All right, which is just another way of saying to the nearest hundredth place. So if 1 can of beans costs 75 cents, how much do 4 cans cost? We have to identify what operation we need to use to find the answers of application problems. So in this case, we are given the price of 1 can of beans, and that's 75 cents. Now we want to figure out how many 4 of those cans cost. Well, if I have 1 can, right, that's going to equal a total of 75 cents. If I get 2 cans, right, that is going to equal, let's see here. So that's going to equal 2 is 75 cents plus 75 cents. That is $1.50. And so forth. Repeated addition is the same as multiplication. So rather than needing to add 75 cents 4 times, you do 75 cents times 4. And that will give you the total price, right, of 4, and then of 4 cans. And then if you needed to figure out more, you would just change what you were multiplying by. So the total of those 4 cans is $3. 5 cans of corn cost $4.25. How much does 1 cost? So I want you to notice the first time in A, we started with 1 can and went up to 4. Well, here we're starting with 5 and we're going down to 1. Anytime you start small and go big for these problem types, you have to use multiplication, which does make numbers bigger. If you're going from big to small, you have to use division. So we need to figure out cost per can. So we have cost in money, per means division, and then can is the last unit. So we can use the units to figure out how we set everything up. So the top, the money, is $4.25 divided by 5, right, which is the number of cans. Now I run that division, and I get 85 cents per can. Per can is important to include in your units because 85 cents doesn't mean anything, right? I mean, yeah, it's a monetary amount, but we don't know if it's linked to something. And if it is linked to something, what is it linked to? So make sure to include that detail in your units. So go ahead and try C and D by pausing the video, and then turn it back on and you can go ahead and watch what I've been doing. So your car holds 12.5 gallons of gas. If gas costs $3.25 a gallon, how much does it cost to fill your gas tank? If I have a total of 12.5 gallons of gas, and for every 1 gallon, it's $3.25 per gallon. I'm trying to figure out the total cost of filling my gas. So I'm going from the cost of 1 gallon, right, to the cost of the amount in my tank. So 12.5 gallons. Well, that looks bigger, a bigger number to me, right? We're starting at 1 and going to 12.5. So remember I said, if your number's going up, you have to use multiplication. So we just need to take that 12.5 and we need to multiply it by the $3.25, right? That is going to give me the cost of going to the gas station and fully filling an empty tank of gas. So the total that I get is 40 and then 625 thousandths, but money is always rounded to the hundredth. So the 5 makes the 2 go up to 3, and that 5 drops off. So my final answer is $40.63. It's important to note that I didn't say round your answer to the hundredth, but because it's money, I know that it's rounded to the hundredth. It's a perfect example of how you won't always be told where to round. Some contexts define where things are rounded. So just be careful when you read that. All right, and then the last one. So we have you and 4 friends went to dinner. If your total bill was $52.50 and you split the bill evenly among you, how much did each of you pay for dinner? So we have you and 4 friends. Your total bill was $52.50 and you split the bill evenly. How much did each of you pay for dinner? There's my question mark, right? So there's one question that I'm answering. So I know that the total bill is $52.50. Now we care about the number of people, right? $52.50 paid for how many people to have dinner. Often there's a mistake when people do these. So number of people, because of how it's worded. It says you and 4 friends. Well, that's 1 person plus the 4 friends. So your number of people is actually 5. So be really careful, okay? So we are starting big, right? We're starting at 5 people and we're trying to figure out single cost, right? Or what each person paid. So we're moving to cost per 1 person. Think for a moment what operation we need to use when we have a repeated amount, right? We have a total here. Everybody's paying the same amount, so that's that repetition. We're starting big to then go small. You have to use division. So it's the total bill, $52.50, divided by the total number of people. And that is going to give you the price per person. So the price per person is $10.50. You could say per person, per meal, right? Either of those are fine. One is more specific than the other, right? Because it's actually what we are paying for food, but both of those really tell you the same information. Great job.